What would your younger self say about how your family turned out?
They toasted with champagne like it was the most natural thing in the world, all smiles and teary eyes, as if that moment had been rehearsed for years, and I was just a stranger who happened to sit at the wrong table. The glasses clinked right over my head, literally and figuratively, while I was still trying to chew the last bite of the dry chicken Mom made for dinner. They had made a big deal out of this Sunday dinner for over a week. Mom said it was important we all be there, which usually meant someone was sick or someone had died. So, I showed up, thinking maybe it was finally my turn for something. Maybe Mom and Dad remembered that I'd gotten a raise last month. Maybe they found out I'd helped pay off Aunt Lorraine's medical bills in secret. Or maybe they just wanted to sit like a normal family and eat a meal together without pretending I was a shadow in the corner. But nope. It was about Anna. Again. They waited until we were all sitting down, plates served, before Dad raised his glass and said, to Anna and Chris, "We are so proud of you two. You deserve all the happiness in the world." And just like that, everyone joined in. Mom, Aunt Linda, even our cousin Jared, who barely talks, all lifting their glasses like they were watching some royal coronation. And me? I just kept chewing my chicken and kept my mouth shut because what was I supposed to do? Stand up and say, "Hey, I'm proud of me too?" I poured the wine I brought for myself. No one else touched it. They had their fancy champagne that Anna and Chris brought back from their trip to Napa. The same trip Anna never told anyone was actually funded, in part, by the money Dad pulled from what used to be our joint college savings. But I didn't say anything about that. Just like I never said anything when Anna got into that car accident in high school, and I took the blame because Mom said, "We can't let this ruin her chances of getting into college." Just like I didn't say anything when Dad gave her $5,000 last year for her business idea that ended up being an online boutique she abandoned after 3 weeks. After dinner, when everyone got up to crowd around the engagement ring like it was the Hope Diamond, I picked up plates and started clearing the table. No one asked me to. They never do. They just assume. I'm the help in a family where one child shines and the other just makes things easier. While they laughed and talked about venues and guest lists, I stood at the sink, scraping mashed potatoes off plates and thinking about how, at 33 years old, I still came to these dinners hoping for something different, only to be reminded exactly who I am in this family. I'm the one who drives Mom to her appointments. I'm the one who picks up the dog from the vet. I'm the one who stays late and locks up when they host a party, while Anna leaves early because she's so tired from wedding planning. I'm the one who covers the ugly stuff, like when Mom had that breakdown 2 years ago and Dad pretended it was just the flu. I'm the one who knew the truth and kept it quiet because Anna couldn't handle anything stressful before her finals. I've always been the one who knows too much and says too little. After everyone left, I stayed back to finish up in the kitchen. Mom gave me one of those weak hugs, the kind where her body is still half turned away, and said, "Thanks for all your help, sweetie." Like I was the babysitter. Like I wasn't her daughter who sat at that same table and watched her mother pretend she only had one child worth celebrating. I didn't say much as I left. Just smiled and said, "Good night." I drove home in silence, didn't turn on music, didn't even check my phone until I was already in bed with my laptop open. And that's when I saw the message from Anna. It popped up on my screen like it was urgent, like something was wrong. All it said was, "What did you say to them? Mom looks sick." At first, I didn't even understand what she meant. I hadn't said anything. Not a single thing. Not one passive-aggressive comment. Not one sarcastic remark. I smiled through the whole thing, nodded when people talked, and stayed quiet like always. But somehow, something had shifted. Somehow, the weight of everything I didn't say must have finally landed on them. Or maybe on her. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at her message, rereading it over and over, like it was a code I was supposed to crack. Mom looks sick? From what? A guilty conscience? A realization that she had celebrated a daughter who lied, manipulated, and always landed on her feet because someone else was carrying the weight. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was angry, but because for the first time in years, I wasn't just disappointed. I wasn't just sad. I felt something different. Something sharper. Something that said, Why are you still waiting for them to change? I didn't respond to Anna's text. I just closed my laptop, turned off my phone, and lay in the dark with one very simple thought running through my head, over and over again. You didn't say anything. But maybe it's time you did. And the weirdest part? I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready. That dinner was the last time I played it safe. I didn't make a scene. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flip a table. I just took notes. Because while they were busy celebrating Anna's future, I was finally rewriting mine. They toasted her engagement. I took care of the dishes. But in the silence of that night, something started that none of them saw coming. And I was done waiting for permission to make it hurt. There's a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being physically alone, but from sitting in a room full of people who claim to love you while treating you like a background character in your own life. And I think that Sunday dinner broke something in me. Not in a loud, dramatic, crashing kind of way, but in a quiet, surgical, irreversible way that felt more like a knot finally snapping after years of slow, patient tension. I went home that night without saying anything to Anna, didn't text her back, didn't answer her follow-up call the next morning. And I'm not sure if it was because I didn't know what to say or because I finally realized that I didn't owe her an explanation for staying silent after years of swallowing everything she and our parents threw at me like it was my job to be the family sponge for guilt, secrets, and disappointments no one wanted to name out loud. It's almost funny, in a twisted sort of way, how easy it is to slip into a role someone else wrote for you, especially when that role was handed to you before you were old enough to push back, before you even realized you had a choice in the matter. And I guess that's what I did for most of my life. I played the good daughter, the supportive sister, the one who never caused waves, never made it about her, never asked for much, and certainly never questioned why everything was always about Anna. And the worst part is, I didn't even see it for what it was until much later, until I started putting together all the little things I'd brushed off as not a big deal, and realized they were part of a very big pattern. Like the time in high school when Anna got caught drinking at a party and called me crying, begging me to come pick her up because she couldn't let Mom and Dad find out, and of course I went. Of course I took the blame, because I was the responsible one. The one they'd believe, the one they wouldn't punish as harshly. Or the time she borrowed my car while I was at work and rear-ended someone in the grocery store parking lot, then conveniently forgot to mention it until I got the insurance notice in the mail. Or when I applied for a summer internship out of state and Mom cried for days about how it would tear the family apart if I left. Even though she practically threw a parade when Anna went backpacking through Europe 6 months later with some guy she'd known for 2 weeks and a GoFundMe link. You'd think by now I'd be used to it. The double standards, the quiet betrayals, the way everyone treated Anna like she was made of glass and I was made of steel, but something about that engagement dinner made it all feel sharper, uglier. Like a wound I'd convinced myself had healed was suddenly split wide open, and I couldn't stop thinking about all the ways I'd been erased in the name of keeping the family balanced. So when Anna texted me again on Tuesday, asking if I wanted to get lunch and clear the air, I said yes, not because I wanted to clear anything, but because I wanted to see if she could even name what she did. If she had the self-awareness to recognize the years of small, compounding decisions that led us here. We met at that same little cafe we used to go to in college, back when things between us still felt somewhat salvageable, and the moment she walked in with her polished nails and her fake, tight smile, I knew she hadn't come to apologize. She came to get ahead of whatever she thought I might say. She asked how I was, how work was going, if I was dating anyone, the usual empty script, and I answered politely, nodded along, played the part like always, until she finally leaned in and said, I just want to make sure we're good. You were really quiet at dinner, and Mom said you left kind of abruptly, and I don't know, I got the sense something was off. And I looked her dead in the face and said, nothing's off, Anna. Everything's exactly how it's always been. She blinked, caught off guard, and I saw it in her expression. She didn't know whether that was a compliment or an accusation, and the silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. I paid the bill before she could pretend to reach for her purse, told her I had a meeting to get to, and walked out without looking back. That afternoon, I drove straight to our parents' house, not because I wanted to confront them, but because I needed to see if they would even notice something had shifted. I brought over some things they'd left at my place, just an excuse really, and sat down for coffee with Mom while Dad half listened from the couch, and I started slipping things into the conversation, nothing obvious, just quiet little questions designed to nudge, to poke, to see where the cracks might be hiding. I asked if Anna ever told them about dating Chris's best friend before they got together, and Mom's face went a little pale. I mentioned I'd seen her last credit card statement when I helped her set up online banking and noticed a few charges for wedding venues they hadn't mentioned. I said something like, "It's sweet that you're helping her out so much financially. It must be a lot, especially with all those monthly transfers. I never realized you were still giving her money." And then I smiled and sipped my coffee like I hadn't just dropped a grenade in the middle of the living room. Mom didn't say much after that. Dad pretended not to hear. But the air shifted, just a little, and for the first time, I could tell they were starting to feel it. That maybe I wasn't just the quiet one anymore. That maybe I'd stopped playing my part. That maybe, just maybe, I was done pretending not to see the full picture. When I left, Mom gave me that same weak hug she always does, the kind that feels more like a habit than an expression of affection, and as I stepped out the front door, I glanced back and said, "By the way, I told Anna I wouldn't say anything about the Tahoe trip, but if she brings it up, you might want to act surprised." I didn't explain. I didn't need to. I just walked to my car and drove off, already knowing the questions were starting to form, already knowing they were finally beginning to wonder what I knew and how long I'd known it. Because I hadn't said much yet, but I had just enough to make them nervous. And nervous people make mistakes. There's a certain kind of panic that people like Anna feel, not when something truly terrible happens, but when they start to lose control of the version of themselves they've carefully curated for years, the polished image they've spent their lives defending with half-truths, omissions, and that particular brand of charm that makes other people clean up their messes without ever realizing they've been manipulated. And I think, deep down, Anna started to feel that slipping the moment she saw I wasn't playing along anymore, the second she realized I wasn't reacting the way I usually did, with silence, avoidance, or forced smiles to keep everything civil. Because for someone like her, silence is only useful when it comes from someone obedient, someone afraid of being the villain, someone who can be counted on to take the high road while she skips down the easy one. A few days after I visited our parents and dropped those subtle little seeds, Anna started texting again, not in her usual breezy, casual way, but with clipped sentences and oddly cheerful overtones that didn't match the actual words. Things like, "Hey you. Hope you're doing great. Just wanted to check in again, let's hang soon, okay?" It was like she was trying to pull me back into the familiar rhythm where she controlled the narrative and I just nodded along, and for a moment, I almost responded out of habit. But then I remembered the look in Mom's eyes when I mentioned the wedding money, and how Dad suddenly found the floor more interesting than the conversation, and I realized something I probably should have accepted a long time ago. That none of them ever expected me to pay attention, let alone remember, let alone put pieces together, and the fact that I had been doing exactly that, quietly, patiently, for years, made me more dangerous than they ever imagined. The engagement party was scheduled for that Saturday at a rented event space near the lake. Nothing too fancy, but just upscale enough to remind people that Anna was still the star of the family and that her fiancé, Chris, was the sort of guy who could pay for hors d'oeuvres that no one could pronounce. I wasn't originally planning to go. I had every intention of staying home and letting them do what they always do, gather without me, talk around me, pretend I was just busy or more of a private person, but then something about that plan started to feel too familiar, too easy. And I realized that if I didn't show up, I'd miss my one chance to take control of the room in the only way that would ever register with people who refused to see what was right in front of them unless it made noise. So, I got there early, before anyone else had arrived, under the pretense of helping set up. Anna wasn't even there yet. Chris was handling the catering check-in, and the event coordinator was too distracted with table placements to notice what I was doing. I had brought a flash drive, tucked into my purse beside a spare tube of lipstick and a receipt I'd saved from the last time Anna asked me to cover lunch, promising she'd Venmo me and never did. The flash drive contained a simple audio file. Just one. A clipped, casually cruel little phone recording Anna had made last year that she never intended anyone but her friend Jessica to hear. I had found it completely by accident when I was borrowing her laptop to pull a document for Mom. She'd left the file on her desktop, named it something vague like, haha, one.wave, and curiosity got the better of me. What I heard was Anna laughing, talking about how she told Mom I was probably in therapy again, and that maybe that's why I hadn't gotten the promotion at work, that I wasn't stable enough for management anyway. She said it like it was nothing, like throwing me under the bus was just another way to pass the time over wine and appetizers. I had edited the file just enough to cut the silence, left in her giggles, and added a clean fade-in so there'd be no confusion about who was speaking. Then I uploaded it to the laptop connected to the event space's Bluetooth sound system. It was ridiculously easy. No one asked me why I was behind the tech table. No one questioned why I plugged in a USB drive. I didn't even break a sweat. By the time guests started arriving and music filled the room, I was standing by the back exit, sipping sparkling water, pretending to scroll through my phone, waiting for the right moment. About 45 minutes into the party, just after the toast started wrapping up and people were mingling again, I gave the signal to myself, a quiet nod, and slipped away into the hallway while the track began to play. It was subtle at first, just a voice talking over the music, enough to make people look around, confused, then quiet. And then it got loud enough to be unmistakable. I told Mom Emily's in therapy again. That's probably why she didn't get the promotion. She's not stable enough for management. Silence fell like a brick. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered, "What the hell?" I didn't stay to watch the rest. I had already placed a small envelope near the guest book with Anna's name on it, inside a printed transcript of the recording and a note that read, "I figured if I'm going to be talked about at your party, I should at least be invited to the conversation." By the time Anna found it, I was long gone. I turned off my phone, went home, ordered takeout, and spent the evening curled up on my couch, waiting. I didn't wait long. She showed up at my door just after 10, face red, eyes puffy, pounding like she was entitled to a confrontation I hadn't offered. When I opened the door, she didn't even wait for me to speak. She just stormed into my living room like she owned it, yelling, "What the hell did you do? What the actual hell, Emily?" And I just sat down, looked at her with the calmest expression I could manage, and said, "I didn't say a word. That was all you." She looked like she was going to cry, or scream, or break something, and for a second I almost felt bad. But then I remembered the countless times I'd bit my tongue while she twisted things in her favor, the years I spent cushioning her ego at my own expense, the way she always assumed no one would ever challenge her. And suddenly, I didn't feel bad at all. Because she had finally learned what it felt like to be exposed, and for once, it wasn't going to be swept under the rug. There's a strange, almost addictive clarity that comes after the dust settles from a confrontation you never thought you had the nerve to initiate, a kind of internal silence that doesn't feel like emptiness, but more like peace wrapped in adrenaline. Like the eye of a storm you finally stepped into and found, to your surprise, that you could breathe. After Anna stormed out of my apartment that night, leaving behind nothing but a slammed door and the sharp scent of her expensive perfume clinging to the air like an insult, I sat there for a while, not because I didn't know what to do next, but because I wanted to enjoy that moment in full, uninterrupted, unashamed, and completely mine. I had spent decades being the one who patched things up, the one who swept messes under the rug before they stained the family name, the one who smoothed over everyone else's sharp edges, so to sit in my own living room after setting something on fire, emotionally speaking, and feel no regret at all, that was new and, frankly, a little intoxicating. I didn't hear from Anna for a full 2 days after the party, which would have been unheard of in the past, because normally, she couldn't go 36 hours without sending a link to something she wanted feedback on or forwarding one of Mom's cryptic group texts that she never wanted to deal with directly. But after what happened at the engagement party, I think she was too busy putting out fires, explaining things, rewriting stories, and doing what she does best, managing appearances. I imagine the conversations in their apartment, The carefully curated panic behind closed doors, the tight-lipped smiles she probably gave to relatives who dared to ask, "Was that really you on the speaker?" I didn't need to be there to know exactly how she spun it, because I've known her all my life, and if there's one thing Anna has mastered, it's the art of victimhood wrapped in privilege. By Wednesday afternoon, though, the silence finally cracked, and my phone lit up with a call from her number. I let it ring. Then a text followed, "Can we talk?" "I'm not mad. I just want to understand." That line, "I just want to understand," nearly made me laugh out loud, because what Anna really wanted was to assess the damage, reestablish control, and figure out whether there was any version of the story she could shape into a sympathy arc. But still, I agreed to meet, not because I owed her anything, but because I was curious what she'd say now that the spotlight was no longer hers to control. We met at our parents' house, which she suggested, probably assuming that familiar territory would work in her favor, that maybe in the space where I was always quieter, always smaller, she could put me back in my place. But what she didn't realize, what none of them did, is that once you stop playing the role they've written for you, the set loses all its power. The kitchen, the worn-out couches, the family photos arranged like trophies of selective memory, they didn't intimidate me anymore. If anything, they made me bolder. She was already sitting at the dining room table when I arrived, hands folded, face calm, not a hair out of place, like she'd practiced the whole thing in front of a mirror. I didn't sit right away. I just looked at her for a moment, waiting to see if she'd flinch. She didn't. Of course she didn't. "You humiliated me," she said, not angrily, but with the kind of wounded softness that people like her use when they're hoping guilt will do what logic can't. I pulled out a chair, sat across from her, and simply said, "I exposed you." There was no dramatic pause, no raising of voices, just a plain, quiet fact between us. She blinked, and for the first time, I saw the mask slip a little. "What do you want?" she asked after a moment, like this was some kind of negotiation, like I was angling for something transactional, maybe a public apology, maybe money, maybe a seat at a table I never wanted to sit at again. But the truth was, I didn't want anything from her. Not anymore. "I want you to understand," I said, echoing her earlier text, but with a weight that made her shift in her chair, "that for 33 years, I've watched you lie, manipulate, and charm your way through every corner of this family, and I've let it go. Not because I didn't see it, but because I didn't want to be the one to rip things apart. But after that dinner, after that toast, after watching our parents pretend I didn't even exist while you basked in praise like it was your birthright, I realized something. I'm not the one who's broken. I'm just the one who's been holding the pieces together." She tried to interrupt, but I kept going. "When Dad gave you that down payment for your condo and told me he just couldn't help right now, I said nothing. When Mom begged me to keep quiet about you dating Chris's best friend and insisted it would ruin the wedding, I did as she asked. When you mocked my job, my relationships, my mental health behind my back, and I still showed up to your birthday, still helped clean up after your parties, still took care of things when you forgot, I said nothing. And now? Now I'm done saying nothing." Her mouth opened like she wanted to respond, but she didn't have the words. For once, Anna was speechless. And in that silence, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. A few minutes later, our parents walked in, clearly sensing the tension. Dad looked irritated, Mom looked nervous, and the three of us sat there like bad actors waiting for someone to cue the next line. But I didn't wait. I turned to them and said, as calmly as if I were reading a grocery list, "You told me we couldn't afford to help me with rent last year, but I found the bank statements. You've been sending Anna money every month since 2021. I don't care that you did. I care that you lied." Dad's face turned red almost immediately, like he was caught off guard not just by the accusation, but by the fact that I dared to make one. Mom started with her usual, "It's complicated, sweetheart, you don't understand," but I stopped her. "No, I understand perfectly. You just never thought I'd be the one to call it out." They didn't have anything to say after that. Not really. There were a few half-hearted attempts at explanation, something about Anna being in transition, about how I'd always been more self-sufficient, but the words hung there like excuses that even they didn't believe anymore. Before I left, Anna stood, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "So what, this is revenge?" And I shook my head, more tired than angry, and replied, "No. This is balance. For the first time in my life, I'm not carrying your guilt, your lies, or their expectations. I'm just putting it all down and walking away." And that's exactly what I did. I walked out of that house without looking back, and as the door closed behind me, I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated or proud. I just felt free. And sometimes, that's better than any apology. There's a moment, just before something ends, when everything feels heavier than it should, like the weight of all the unspoken things, the half-truths, and the quiet betrayals finally settle into place, not in a way that crushes you, but in a way that makes it impossible to carry forward without acknowledging that what came before can't continue, not if you value your own sanity. And as I stood in front of my parents' house that evening, staring at the same chipped paint on the porch rail I used to lean against as a kid, waiting to be called inside, I knew that this wasn't just a visit, it was a funeral, not for a person, but for the version of our family that had always relied on me being silent, forgiving, and conveniently invisible. I wasn't walking in to start a fight. I wasn't walking in to make anyone cry or explain myself. I was walking in to close a door I should have locked behind me years ago. They were all there, Mom, Dad, and Anna, waiting like a little tribunal at the dinner table, clearly uncomfortable, though none of them would ever admit that they were. The table was already set, the food was already on the plates, and everything looked far too neat, like they thought if they controlled the optics, they could control the outcome. But it didn't matter anymore. The stage didn't scare me. The audience didn't matter. For the first time, I wasn't sitting at that table as the daughter who'd been trained to keep the peace. I was sitting there as someone who finally understood that peace built on silence is just another kind of prison. We started with awkward small talk, the kind that makes your skin itch because it's so clearly avoiding the real conversation, and I let them have it for maybe 5-10 minutes until I set my fork down, wiped my mouth with the napkin like I was preparing for something casual, and said, with a calm that surprised even me, "So, do we want to pretend this is normal, or are we actually going to talk?" Mom flinched slightly, Dad stared at his plate like it might offer him an escape route, and Anna, predictably, crossed her arms, defensive already, as if she was preparing to be attacked instead of held accountable. It didn't matter. I wasn't there to scream. I was there to finish. "I know about the money," I started, not cruelly, not dramatically, just plainly, like it was an obvious fact we could all stop dancing around. "I've seen the transfers, the ones you've been sending Anna since 2021. I know about the condo, the Tahoe trip, the dress fittings you covered, the venue deposits. I know that when I asked for help last year, and you told me things were tight, you were actively funding a lifestyle you wouldn't even help me survive." Dad looked up sharply then, as if the word survive caught him off guard, like he hadn't even considered that while they were throwing thousands toward Anna's curated happiness, I was juggling a broken water heater, overdue medical bills, and the kind of anxiety that doesn't let you sleep because you're too busy calculating which necessity you can skip that month. "I'm not mad about the money," I continued, because truly, that wasn't the core of it anymore. "I'm mad that you lied, that you acted like I was a burden for needing help, that you made me feel guilty for asking, while at the same time throwing silent support behind Anna like she was the only one worth investing in." Mom tried to interject, something soft and vague, probably about how they didn't mean to hurt me, but I held up a hand and shook my head, because I wasn't going to let them soften this moment into something palatable. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but you did. Repeatedly. Systematically. And I let you. For years. Because I thought being the quiet one meant I was the strong one. But now I know it just meant I was the one you found easiest to ignore." Anna opened her mouth then, looking furious and scared and exposed, and said, "You've made your point, okay? You didn't have to blow up my entire engagement just to feel seen." I looked at her, really looked, and realized something that settled in my chest like a strange kind of closure. She still didn't get it. She still thought this was about jealousy or revenge or some petty rivalry that could be fixed with an apology and a few tears. "I didn't blow up your engagement, Anna," I said, slowly and clearly. "You did. I just stopped hiding it for you. The room went quiet after that, the kind of silence that isn't empty but loud with tension, with the crackling awareness that something permanent had shifted and couldn't be undone. And then I stood up, reached into my bag, and pulled out a manila envelope I'd brought with me, not because I needed to prove anything further, but because I wanted to be very clear that I wasn't bluffing. Inside were copies of the bank transfers, printouts of texts Anna had sent to friends where she belittled our parents behind their backs while accepting their money, even a few emails where she'd guilt Mom into paying for things by claiming I was doing better now and didn't need as much support. I slid the envelope across the table to Dad and said, "I'm leaving this here so you can't say you didn't know. You can choose to look at it or not. That part's up to you." Then I stood, grabbed my coat, and reached into my pocket for my house key, the spare I'd kept on my parents' ring for the last 15 years, and placed it next to my glass. "You won't need this anymore," I said, and for the first time, Mom didn't try to stop me. She just stared, eyes wide, lips parted, like she finally understood that something real was happening, something irreversible. Before I left, I paused at the doorway and said the last thing I needed to say, the one truth I'd never allowed myself to say out loud before that moment. I spent most of my life trying to earn your love by being easy. Easy to deal with, easy to forget. I thought if I didn't cause problems, eventually I'd be seen. But now I get it. You only see what makes noise. So this is me making noise. And I hope it echoes. That was 6 weeks ago. I haven't heard from them since, and honestly, I haven't been waiting. Anna's engagement? Still happening, from what I've heard through mutual friends, though I don't know if she's pretending it's all fine or if she actually believes it can be. And I guess, in the end, it doesn't really matter, because I'm not living in the shadow of her choices anymore. I'm not measuring my worth by how well I keep the peace or how much weight I can carry without complaint. Then, just last night, something unexpected happened. I checked my mail, something I usually do without much thought, and found an envelope with no return address, no stamp, just slipped into the box by hand. Inside was a single sheet of paper, printed in plain font and signed, with one line, "You were right." She lied about everything. No name, no explanation, no closure. But strangely, I didn't need any of those things. Because whoever sent it, Dad, Chris, maybe even Mom, someone finally saw it. Someone finally understood what I'd been trying to survive quietly all those years. And for me, that was enough. Because I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for truth. And sometimes, truth is the loudest thing you can leave behind.